All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the November edition of VRM Insider. We're going to try to give our participants a few minutes to start joining in before we get started, but I feel like most everybody knows the drill by now. If you don't, that means you haven't been to enough VRM Insider, so welcome. I know that it gets increasingly difficult to participate in these kinds of things in that short window between a lot of our clients' busy season and then the holidays, which is right here on us. So even before we get started today, I just want to take a moment and just say on behalf of VRM, happy Thanksgiving. We're just so thankful for all of our clients and our partners, our vendors, our parent company, Inhabit IQ, our friends at VRMA and everybody. We're just so thankful to have weathered this past 18 plus months with such an amazing group of people, and including our staff here at VRM, who we're also very thankful for. So just want to start off that way so I don't forget later on. In today's webinar, we have several people featured, so we'll be sharing that in just a moment. But before we jump into that, we'll just take care of a few housekeeping items. So this webinar is being recorded as normal. So if you want to rewatch it later or send it over to one of your colleagues in the office, you will have that availability to you. It'll come directly to your inbox, or it will be on the VRM admin console for you to access as well. If you have any questions during today's webinar, you can drop those down in the Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen. If you are on your desktop, you should hover down towards the bottom and you'll see a little Q&A icon there. Drop your questions in that window. And if it's appropriate where we are in the webinar, we can stop and ask those questions live. If we're not quite at the right spot, we'll hold those until the end, but don't worry, we will cover as many of the questions as we possibly can. And what we can't cover, we'll follow up in an email or something like that, I promise. All right, so if we're all ready to get started, we will go ahead and introduce our panel today. There we go. So it is our great honor to have with us someone who's near and dear to our heart, and that is Miller Hawkins. If you haven't had the pleasure of meeting Miller, he is the new president of VRMA, and he is also a VRM client and the owner over at Boo Realty. So we are very excited to have him on today's webinar. We're going to be talking about the Right to Rent program. Some of you may have never even heard of that before. It might be brand new to you, and some of you may have heard us mention it, but it is really, really important for you as a property manager. You're going to hear about why it's important to your owners and why to us as an industry as a whole, why it's really important that we know what this is, that we get involved in it as soon as possible, and really start protecting ourselves. And Miller is a huge advocate of this program on many different levels, so that's why he's here today. We also have with us Scott Leggett. Scott, most of you know because you've seen him here on VRM Insider in the past. Scott is a former property manager, and then Scott was with LSI for several years, and now he is with Inhabit IQ as the Director of Government Affairs and Advocacy. So he'll be here talking to us today just kind of from the Inhabit IQ side, and what does that mean as far as the Right to Rent program and its involvement with government affairs and advocacy. We also have Michelle Smith. You guys all know and love Michelle. She's our VRM Director of Support and Training. And my name is Tracy. I'm the Director of Marketing. I'm just here as your host. All right, so you guys ready to get started?
Ready.
Yes.
All right, so we are going to be doing this in a Q&A format. So I'm going to be asking Miller and Scott some questions, and they are going to be answering those for us. And then later on in the presentation, Michelle is going to go step by step through the back end of the VRM system and how you would set up this program and how you would use it from within VRM. All right, so if we're ready, let's go to question number 1. So this question is for Miller and Scott both. So tell us, what is right to rent?
Scott, I'll let you start it off on that one since you all initiated this.
Sure. So right to rent is a is a program that's designed to provide a predictable and sustainable source of income for advocacy for the vacation rental industry. That's just the short definition. The bigger question, I think, is why right to rent? And the reason for right to rent is we are seeing advocacy issues crop up all over the country, everywhere. We track advocacy through a service that we subscribe to, and there are on average 100 new regulations proposed for the vacation rental industry across different municipalities, counties, and state governments across our country. And we're very much underfunded in this fight to fight for the rights of the vacation rental industry.
If I can chime in on that one, as far as the VRMA goes, first of all, Tracy and Michelle, I'd like to thank you all for having Scott and I on this webinar. As you'll see as you go through this webinar, the importance of advocacy and what it's doing to our industry. 5 years, 10 years ago, you probably didn't hear about a lot of these things, and as Scott said, 100 of them every day pop up around the country, and we'll get into that more later. But as far as the right to rent from our side of it, we wanted to, I'm very, very proud to partner with Inhabit IQ and what they're doing, and it is actually doing that. It's giving all of us property managers the right to rent our properties and keep our livelihood afloat and doing what we're doing and what we've done for decades. And so we're proud to partner with Inhabit IQ, and we're just scratching the surface of this thing getting launched and what it's going to do for our community.
Awesome.
Great.
All right. So I think
Miller,
go ahead.
I can add that while the program's been initiated by Inhabit IQ, it's going to be industry-wide. Almost all of the other PMS systems who are necessary to facilitate the program, as you'll understand how it works in a moment, are also going to participate. So we're starting out with Inhabit IQ companies, simply because that's the simplest for us to begin with, but it'll be an across-the-board program with all of the PMS systems participating.
Right. And so as we go into the coming months, I believe what will happen is we will see between VRMA and the property managers, meaning you and us as a property manager softwares, we will just be communicating those pieces of information to the public as a whole of when it's going to be available for different people at different times. Because obviously for you as a property manager, that's what Michelle is going to show you later. There's some work that we had to do on our back end to set this up so you can use it easily. But that doesn't mean that other companies won't be able to use right to rent also. And I think that's what Scott was getting at there. So that it can be an industry-wide availability. All right, so question number 2. Scott, this one's for you. Who is Inhabit IQ, and why is Inhabit IQ involved in the right to rent program?
Sure. So Inhabit IQ, as many of you probably already know, is a private equity firm that has invested heavily in the vacation rental space and in property management. Inhabit IQ owns 40 companies worldwide. All of them provide technology to property managers across the world. 14 of those brands are specific to vacation rentals. So we have 14 vacation rental brands within the Inhabit IQ collection of companies. 5 of them are PMS providers. here in the U.S. and one in Europe. And why is Inhabit IQ involved in this? That's a great story. As the pandemic began, we got together, the leadership of Inhabit IQ got together and formed a task force. And that task force was just charged to, at first, with looking at what the vacation rental industry would look like on the other side of COVID and the pandemic. And at first, we weren't even sure there was going to be an industry left after the pandemic. I mean, the fears were so great that we were going to be hit so hard that, you know, we wondered whether we would even exist. But we have been extraordinarily fortunate and have actually thrived through the pandemic. But we looked at, one of the things the task force looked at was what could Inhabit IQ do that would help the entire industry, just not our clients, but the entire industry out there. And what we settled on was a program very much like what the hotel and motel industry does to support their advocacy efforts. At the time we were looking at this, the vacation rental industry was being treated differently by local governments and state governments than other hospitality sectors. For instance, in Florida, hotels and motels were allowed to stay open, but vacation rentals were banned for several months at the beginning of the pandemic. And what we were looking for was parity. And to get that parity and being treated fairly along with other forms of accommodations takes a lot of effort and a lot of funding for advocacy. And the model we looked at in the hotel motel industry was that a small part of every transaction most companies do goes to advocacy efforts, just a very small percentage of every reservation. And we looked at, and we've talked about doing that in the vacation rental space for many years, but there really wasn't an easy way to facilitate that because someone was going to have to collect that money, someone was going to have to track that money, someone was going to have to get the companies to agree to participate, and then someone was going to have to get the funding to an organization who could handle and coordinate the advocacy efforts. But we realized that the hotel motel model could be used in our industry now if it was facilitated through the PMS systems, because we can track every single transaction and know if a company is participating, how much they would be contributing. So this is the way it works. And with right to rent and in the hotel motel industry, a company voluntarily decides that they would like to contribute a small portion of every transaction to an advocacy fund. And in this case, what we're asking for companies to do is to donate $1, $2, or $3 per transaction to a fund that will be managed by the VRMA as a third party is the greatest and biggest influencer and has the most resources in our industry currently to coordinate advocacy efforts.
So Scott, let me just stop you right there for just a second, because I want to make sure everybody understands that the reason why we're asking this particular question is because we want to make sure that everybody understands what Inhabit IQ's role is and was in the startup of Right to Rent, and to really also understand, we'll talk about it a little bit more in depth as we get into some more questions, that VRMA as a international player in this space could really carry that message on to be able to get the message out to as many people as possible, and then to round up all of the players who are in this space, meaning the PMs, the vendors, everybody who has a stake in this game, right? And the one thing that's really interesting to me about what you said, Scott, when you think about the hotel industry, those are most of those are really heavy hitters, right? I mean, there are multi-million dollar companies that really own that space. If you look at your average PM, they're not gonna be on the same level as like the Hilton, right? They're not in the same
Exactly.
space. And so Inhabit IQ, that's when they saw, okay, there's a need for this. What can we do about it? And then partnered with VRMA to produce this program.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really the important part to understand is Inhabit IQ. Can we say they're protecting their own investment as well? Absolutely. Yes. Just like you as a property manager want to protect your investment, just like any of our other like third party integrations and vendors want to protect their investment as well.
So
And protect the guests, right? Like, who doesn't want to not be able to take a vacation? Everybody wants to take a vacation. And so before we go on to question number 3, I think this is a bit of a redundant question, but I want to ask it anyway as a part of, were there any problems that existed before COVID, or are all of these advocacy issues brand new? Were you guys able to hear me?
yes, the problems existed well before COVID, and the point that I think you were making there, Tracy, is a very important point, is that when it comes to the hotel and motel industry, who is our biggest competitor, we are completely outgunned in the advocacy fight. These are, in many cases, large corporations, but also very large associations that have put together these programs, and they have for many years had advocacy funds that are in the multi-million-dollar range to protect in their industry and make sure that the laws that are crafted locally are favorable to them. In our instance, this is probably a big thing for people to really realize. We are threatening the hotel and motel industry significantly. Last year, we reached parity in number of rooms with the hotel and motel industry. In other words, there are as many bedrooms and vacation rentals as there are hotel and motel rooms across this country. And at the same time, we've also changed in the eyes of the consumer, mostly through the pandemic. Pre-pandemic, 30% of the public said that they would like to stay in a vacation rental. The latest surveys over the last several months have said 70% of the U.S. population would like to stay in a vacation rental. So when you see those numbers shift, when we have as many rooms as the hotels and motels, when consumer preference has a preference for vacation rentals over hotels and motels, you have a very large traditional industry that now is threatened by vacation rentals.
Which
and they're
I think
determined.
Sorry, Scott, go ahead.
And they're determined to craft laws that are favorable to them and not favorable to the vacation rental space.
Gotcha. So this sets us up really well for question number 3, because we're talking about who has the inventory to meet that 70% demand. So who is right to rent design for, and who benefits from it? Miller?
Thanks, Tracy. To back up just a little bit, to touch on some things that Scott said, when the pandemic hit, we literally were taken by surprise, obviously. We all came together in this community, and the homeowners even came together with the property managers and the suppliers, and everybody got together. And even though we are competitors, we're friendly competitors, but we realized that our livelihood was being treated differently than the hotels were being treated by the governments. A main state that shows this was Florida. The hotels down there were treated 100% different than the vacation rental managers and the vacation rentals. So with that said, and Scott said that pre-pandemic we were, we're outgunned by the hotel industry, and yeah, we were, and the need for advocacy, as you were saying, has this been just come on, since last spring? No, it's been rumbling for years, but since the limelight of vacation rentals came to light, and we started competing against the hotels, the laws and the regulations, we're a multi-billion-dollar industry, and our we've become a player out there. So the being outgunned is, I think, a thing of the past, and I think that with this right to rent program, we're going to be a big player in this space when it comes to fighting for our rights and our advocacy efforts. So getting around to your question, who is it designed for? In a nutshell, right now it's designed for vacation rental managers who have property management software systems, because it's giving Inhabit IQ is giving us the avenue to which we are collecting money, which we'll get into later. We are collecting money from guests and soon to be owners that Scott can elaborate on later. We're taking this money. It's not coming into my escrow account, but it's coming into my company as a contribution from the guest, and then from there it's going straight to VRMA from my property software system. So who is it designed for? It's designed for us to collect money and give to the VRMA advocacy fund, which we'll get into in a minute of why it's important. Who does it benefit? I guess the best way to say that, if you have a pulse, it benefits you, because if you have a pulse, you're either a property manager, you're a guest who takes vacations, you're an owner that provides a property for vacations, or you're a supplier that services people who take vacations. So I think everybody in the human race qualifies. If they take a vacation, which I assume pretty much 100% of the human population does, it's going to benefit everybody, because as we go on in time, these governments around the country are starting to crack down on noise, parking, and trash, and occupancy, and safety standards, and everything else. And they're finding a way to shut down vacation rentals. They're not going to be able to shut down the hotels, but they're going to try to shut down these vacation rental companies and ban short-term rentals around the country. And as I'll say later on today, if it's not affected you yet, just wait, because it will. I live in a very trendy, transient part of the country over here in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And over the past 6 months, we have had to fight regulations in North Myrtle Beach, and we are currently starting to fight regulations on Hilton Head Island, 15 minutes north and 4 hours south in our little state. That we love tourism. That's our number one industry is tourism. And yet we're having to fight two regulations, fought one and won, and fighting one. We've joined forces to fight, the one in Hilton Head. We can't afford that without donations. The VRMA is jumped right in there on both of them, and we can't afford that to do it, for free. So we are getting these funds from advocacy donations, and now with the right to rent, which will help the advocacy fund with VRMA to fight these. So like I said, if it hasn't hit your neighborhood yet, it is coming. It will hit your neighborhood, and you'll be looking for help.
If I could add to that, Miller, I usually start out my discussions with groups by asking for a show of hands. how many people have been impacted by local regulations in their area. And these are at some fairly large conferences with large audiences. The lowest I've ever seen is 50% of the audience raise their hand, and up to 90% do. So that many people are already impacted. There are some examples out there like Ski Town's Telluride, Steamboat Springs, places like that that are dealing with very, very restrictive regulations, which will almost effectively shut down vacation rentals in those areas. And they never thought for their lives that vacation rentals could be regulated there, because the economy is so dependent on it. But oftentimes, a lot of thought about lives and economic impact are not considered before thoughtless regulations are proposed that could impact homeowners, property values, taxes, quality of life, and the livelihoods of everybody in this industry.
Yeah, and it has gone. Our president, one of the past presidents, Jody Rafosco, up in Garrett County in Deep Creek, Maryland, a rogue fire marshal that reports directly to the governor came in and is trying to institute some regulations with the vacation rentals up there, with making them from residential to commercial with the inspections and the fire systems, and these things just come out of nowhere, and they did not expect it, and they're having to fight that up there. So it's coming to a locale near you, and it'll be in some way, shape, or form that someone's going to try to do something. They're going to bring up something, and this little small band of homeowners gets together, and they march on City Hall, and unless we're there, we hear about it. The VRMA's got radar out there. We hear about it, and we act up and suit up with armor and go fight. And the right to rent funds are the ammunition that we use.
Awesome. So let's move on to question number 4. So how does the right to rent program work, Scott?
Sure. So what happens is vacation rental managers, through their PMS systems, voluntarily decide that they make the decision to participate and are asked to donate $1, $2, or $3 per transaction. And that goes right into their general, those are recorded and flows to their general ledger, and it becomes an account payable at the end of the month to the VRMA advocacy fund from the general ledger. It's all voluntary, and as Miller alluded to at the beginning of this, right now the simplest thing for us to do is just to go through the property managers, but there are several other groups here that have a stake in this game, and the ones with the largest stake in the game are the property owners, because these people have homes worth hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars that they put into vacation rentals that could be, whose property value and use could be completely overthrown by regulations. And so we are going to give property owners an opportunity to participate as well. And we've already been approached voluntarily by several of the OTAs who would also like to donate per transaction to the Right to Rent Fund. So as you can see and start to do the math in your head of all the vacation rentals, all the number of transactions, all the property owners, we will go from having a very tepid funding to having a very robust funding. As Miller said earlier, we'll be able to really fight this battle on many, many fronts.
And if I can chime in on that, Scott, the how does right to rent work? When I got back from the VRMA International in San Antonio, I talked to the folks at VRM Software, and I said, I want to get this started. I want to help. And it was.
I just need to say, it was not when you got back.
Oh,
It
right.
was at VRMA.
Right. You're right. You're right. And
he didn't wait till he got back.
I know. You're right. My bad. But yeah, so I was like, we need to get started in this. And I was asked if I would be a beta tester, for the right to rent. And before they could even ask the question, I said, yes, please let me do it. And it was as simple as letting you all know that I wanted to do it. A webinar, an onboarding process call came on. You all took us by the hand, and you shared our screen. We shared our screen, and next thing you know, they were showing how it was going to work. And we just clicked on. Scott said it's 1, 2, or 3. I actually thought it was 1, 3, or 5, but it's 1, 2, or 3. So I chose $3. And the question I had then was, okay, these guests are paying this $3, and it's going to the advocacy fund. I said, if you call up a homeowner, and you're talking about protecting their investments, I think the homeowner should be more actively involved in this than the guest, because yes, the guest is taking a vacation, but the owner's being the one paid for it, and for the vacation. So the owners should be asked to join this thing, and I think it should be mandatory. I know that's probably a stretch to get it mandatory, but we're protecting your investment. And there's people that are fighting to take the right to rent from you, which is now going to affect your investment. So the onboarding process, through us here at Boo Realty was absolutely seamless. And we've been doing it for a little over a month now, and it's going great. And I cannot wait for the beginning of the year when all of our reservations really start pouring in for the summer to see what this does.
Biller, and adding to what you said, and probably doing a little bit better job of than I did originally to say, how does the right to rent work? We should point out that the money never touches the hands of VRM, never touches the hands of Inhabit IQ. It flows directly to the VRMA, and the VRMA uses their discretion in how the money is spent, but with some specific guidelines. 40% of the money goes to national and big topic kind of things that are shared threats across the country. 40% goes back to local areas, so that when there's a hot spot, an issue that comes up, that we can address it immediately. 20% of that funding is put into a reserve, so that if we have another situation like a pandemic where we're fighting the battle on so many fronts that simultaneously, that we have the resources in hand to do so.
All right. So that's how right to rent works. Miller, I think this is a great question for you. Why is right to rent important to me, meaning our friends listening, as a property manager?
If it's a simple answer. If you want to continue to do what you've been doing, to put food on your table, send your kids to college, have a livelihood, and retire one day, then this should be important to you. Because if it's not, then at some point, someone's going to affect the way that you do business. And once the laws are passed and the regulations are in place and your industry is banned, you're not going to be able to get it back. So you're going to have to go do something else. So, we realized this, years back, and VRMA a couple of years ago, we raised almost $50,000 to fight advocacy efforts around the country. Last year, 2 years ago, we raised $150,000, because the regulations were popping up all of, around the country. Last year, we had a target of $200,000. The funds started coming in. We raised it to $250,000 for our goal. They kept coming in. We raised it to $300,000. They kept coming in, and we raised over $330,000 last year with our advocacy fund. And the collaborative has met, and we've had several summits throughout the year, and that money's being spent or is already spent and allocated to anywhere from Lincoln County, Oregon, Monterey County, California, Arizona, Myrtle Beach, the economic impact study in South Carolina, Tybee Island, Garrett County, Summit County, and Colorado. It's going everywhere around the country. So, we're going to run out of money as far as the advocacy fund goes, and the regulations are going to continue to rear their ugly head. So why is it important to me as a property manager? Is I am contributing, and I'm going to contribute. I contribute as a company, but I'm also going to contribute through the Right to Rent program, to where VRMA has a large source of income to come in to help every one of these municipalities, whether it's at the state level, local level, county level, city level, wherever it is. The trouble, as I said a minute ago, is coming your way, and you're going to need VRMA to help you. There's experts. We have experts. We have lobbyists. We have the ammunition to fight these regulations that are rearing up around the country. So, and with that, it's getting costly. So why is it important? If you want to continue your livelihood and do what you're doing, then this should be extremely important and on your front burner.
It's really just one of those costs of entry into a business and cost of doing business, because Miller, you said something earlier that I'd like to reiterate. This isn't all just direct regulation that's coming from your town council or someplace or county government or wherever it may be. In many instances, it's things like building codes, like Miller mentioned. The up there in Maryland, a single fire marshal there decided on his own that any building with 5 bedrooms or greater, he was going to designate as commercial. He was going to interpret it as commercial, which meant that it would need sprinkler systems, more egress from the upper floors, so different exterior forms of stairways and egress, ADA standards, American Disability Act, all sorts of things. So it's not just a direct regulation. It can, in one part of the country up in New Hampshire, an insurance company is refusing to insure a condo complex that in their bylaws specifically allow vacation rentals. And the insurance company says, if you allow vacation rentals in your bylaws, we're not going to insure you. There's just so many different ways. And that's, by the way, against their charter with the state up there, where they have to treat everybody equally, all potential clients. So, but nonetheless, unless somebody is there prepared to do battle, these things are passing in some of these places. One of the single highest concentration of regulation is in the state that's best known for tourism, and that's Hawaii. On every island there, every town, every municipality, there's restrictions being proposed on vacation rentals, are in many cases already enacted.
Wow, that's incredible. So a while back, we did a VRM Insider with VRMA Advocacy. And Scott, you were on that webinar, weren't you? If my memory serves me correctly.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, I believe so
Yeah.
too. So I'll make sure to put a link to that webinar in our show notes in the blog when this one goes out, so that the two are connected. But one of the things that stuck out to me from that webinar was this kind of concept of, essentially, as a PM, what you could be thinking about you're doing is you're pre-funding some of your defense, right? Like, because here's the thing, ignorance is bliss, right? So if you're over there and none of this has affected you and you're just diddy bopping away, it hasn't affected you, well, that's awesome, good for you. But like Miller said, it's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of time before some groups, some rogue fire marshal, somebody somewhere gets their hands in your business, whether it's at the state, local, or like kind of the federal, national level. So you can look at the Right to Rent program and funding the VRMA advocacy as you're pre-funding for what may come. And it's not if it's going to come, it's when. It's just when it happens. No one could predict what happened last year in March. And there's no way to predict what the next thing will be, but guarantee there will be a thing. There will be something that's going to need more than what you might be able to shell out at that moment to protect you and your investment, and your owners and your guests. So this pre-funding concept, that was pretty cool. So
and Tracy, if I can add on to that, I hope everybody on this call or listens to this call on the from the recording is a VRMA member. If you're not, I highly encourage you to join, before the end of the year. But the thing about this that you said, when you said ignorance is bliss, and I don't know if you were referring it to this way or not, but there's a lot of people out there, they don't have their radar turned on or know how to turn their radar on to see what regulations have been filed with your city or your county or your state. And VRMA has a government affairs division that's all they do. They look, they listen. A VRMA member may call them and say, hey, I just heard, I got wind, something's going on in Hilton Head, and they dive into it. But most of the time, it's VRMA calling the vacation rental managers in that area going, don't know if you know this or not, but this just popped up. The 100 that Scott was just referring to, this just popped up. And you may need to get involved and gather the troops there in Hilton Head or North Myrtle Beach or Garrett County to fight this thing, because, again, sometimes they'll try to slide this stuff in, to a city council meeting and get it passed on the first or second reading without, you even knowing about it. So VRMA has got their ears out there, and they have boots on the ground around the country that they can now notify you to tell you what the problem is in your own backyard that you may not have heard about.
So I just want to echo that. I'm so glad you brought that up, Miller. And I feel like this might be a good point to too say we can definitely say that VRMA believes in this so strongly and believes in supporting their members so strongly that, and I'll let Scott give the details, but right to rent in no shape, way, or form was going to be something that was going to make VRMA more money. Is that right, Scott?
No. Absolutely, it does not. The money is allocated and set aside in a separate funding, has separate protocols on how it's spent. It is exclusively for advocacy. And it occurred to me while Miller was speaking there, as you might ask yourself, well, why should I do this if I'm not a VRMA member? If you choose to participate in this program, VRMA will automatically give you a one-year membership that you'll be able to make that decision after you've been able to see and use those benefits, the education programs, the certification programs, the conferences, and all the other resources that they have there. So when you ask where does my contribution donation go, it goes 100% to advocacy efforts. Never touches VRM, never touches Inhabit IQ or anyone else, never used for any other source. And it has a different mechanism to determine how the money is spent than from other funding in the VRMA.
That's awesome. So 100%, everybody, 100%, no processing fees or no handling fees taken off the top. 100%
No,
goes directly into the advocacy.
no salaries, nothing. Everything is done with the existing staff there, and it's IQ. When we looked at this at first, we actually hired a couple of consultants, and they encouraged us to, yeah, go for this, do this. It's a great idea, but don't give the control of the funding to anybody else. Let Inhabit control it. We decided absolutely not. That wasn't what we wanted to do. We didn't want to be the decision maker. We didn't feel like we had the expansive knowledge and membership that VRMA does to learn about all the issues when they occur and to have feet on the ground locally, because at the end of the day, the funds here will be used to support many different aspects, but the battle is going to be fought in each area by local people there too. So some of this actually goes to help form alliances. Some of the uses, when you talk about where does it go, funds economic impact statements, cost of compliance statements, affordable housing statements, very, very expensive items that are needed to support our position and to win the battle there. And so, and VRMA is well versed in how to put those things together and the resources necessary to actually craft and do the research for those studies.
And let me chime in real quick when we're talking about donations and the advocacy fund and fighting battles. I'd like for everybody on this webinar to know, they're talking about the money does not go to Inhabit, does not go to VRM. It goes straight to, kudos and a heartfelt and sincere thanks to Inhabit IQ. You all are our largest donor contributor to the advocacy fund. Out of all the money that I was talking about that we've raised, Inhabit IQ is at the top of the list. We thank all of our contributors and donors, but Inhabit IQ is number one when it comes to the amount that you all have donated. So, you all realize the importance of this. You're protecting your investment and everything, but just a side note from VRMA to Inhabit IQ, publicly, thank you for your support.
Yay!
Thank you.
All right, so now we've covered a lot of ground. What is it? How does it work? Why is it important? So now the question is, how do I set this up? How do I get this amazing program to work for me in my VRM software? And so that is where we're going to turn it over to the lovely Michelle Smith, and she is going to talk to you about how you can access this within VRM and how you can set it up.
Thank you, Tracy. So we're going to go ahead and get right to it. So you, all VRM clients have this currently in their admin console. If the new permissions that are out there, there's two of them. There's miscellaneous right to rent and default right to rent opt-in authorization. All employees that have access to our miscellaneous module within VRM will have the miscellaneous right to rent permission. The default right to rent opt-in authorization, that is only by default given to employees that have a general manager role and permissions to the system configuration, because that is that's where you opt in for this program. So I'm going to talk about both of those here.
Just to clarify, we're not talking about VRM employees. We're talking the
Client employees.
Client employees, right?
That's correct. So in VRM, under the miscellaneous module, you'll now see right to rent. So up here is what you'll get if you only have the miscellaneous right to rent permission. What your reservation is, housekeeper, people that are not business, decision makers within the company, they'll have access to that. What that allows them is to read about it. They can click on, I'm interested, tell me more, and they can read at the VRMA website the information about that right to rent, that they can go to their manager and say, we think this is important for us to participate in, but it does not allow them to opt in. That's grayed out. If you have the permission to opt in as a general manager within your company, or system configuration permissions, then you get this screen here. Everything is the same except that opt-in button is now activated. So this is where you would go to opt into right to rent. So once you click on that opt-in, this is the screen that you'll see. And on this screen, this is where we can set up the program. So it tells you about the donations going to be taken per reservation. It's going to distribute at final distribution of the reservation. We would set up a target account, or I'm sorry, an account that we want that money to come out of. So as Miller said earlier, you can set up a guest charge. You can set up an owner charge when we get to that, and you can take the money from other places. But this right to rent is something that's set up on the back end behind the scenes. What that means is you're not going to see necessarily a charge on the reservation that triggers this. This right to rent configuration here is going to automatically distribute whatever amount you select to donate when that reservation distributes. So we suggested, as we walk through this with Miller and setting up this in his system, is using your management commission or management fees account. And basically the way that works is that's where the money is going to come out of. So you can definitely set up a guest charge to collect those funds from the guests, and you would set those up to send the money to that same account that this fee is coming out of. So it's a wash within your general ledger journal. It comes in and it goes right out for this donation. And this way it's covered, because this is going to happen even if a reservationist mistakenly was to remove that guest charge. This portion of the donation that's set up here is automatically going to happen. So that's why we suggest using one of your management accounts that has funds going into that. And then we're going to set up the target account is automatically created by the VRM system when you activate this. And what that means, and I'll show you that here in a minute, is that the VRM system is going to create a vendor profile for VRMA, and we're going to create an account called Right to Rent. And that account will automatically have that VRMA vendor assigned to it. And we'll go through that here in a minute. Here you can set up what amount you want to donate per reservation. As it was mentioned before, you can do $1, $2, $3. We also have an option for other. If you want to donate a different amount than what's available here, you can select that and then set it the amount that you want to donate. And then we have this configuration of when this feature should start. So the date that you set up in here is going to be looking at the date the reservation is booked. So for example, you may have a lot of reservations already on the books that were made, and on those reservations, the guest was not charged for this right to rent. So you may want to begin this starting any bookings that are made, you know, let's say tomorrow, 11/23 forward. That'll give you a chance to set up your guest charge, and you can configure that guest charge with a start date based on the booking date as well. So the two match. So that way, any reservations made from today or tomorrow forward would have this right to rent charge come out, and they'll have that guest charge applied. So once you have all that configured the way that you want it to be set up, you would sign here and then hit activate. So once you do that, as I mentioned on the previous screen, if you were then to go under your maintenance managed vendors, you're going to see a vendor for VRMA. We have filled all the information out for you for this vendor, including the routing and the account number. you can either send a check into the VRMA monthly, or if you wish to pay direct deposit, you would just need to come down here and check that box and hit save. But the routing and account number are already configured within that vendor profile. Then over here under accounting, we have, or I'm sorry, under system configuration and financial, we've created that account as well. So we have your right to rent account configured, and it shows right here, we automatically assign that VRM vendor to that account. All right, and then looking at a reservation. So this is a reservation example that we don't have a guest charge. I just wanted to show how this works when the reservation distributes first. We have our total cost of our reservation that's been paid up. This reservation has distributed, and you'll see that $3 will automatically come out of that account that we configured when we were setting it up to activate the right to rent donation. And it's going to go directly into that right to rent account. Okay. And my next slide here is basically using Miller's setup as an example. Miller's chosen to set up a guest charge. We have done that in his system. So that guest charge is applied to the reservation, and that reservation distributes. It's taking that $3 from prepay from the reservation, putting into the management fees account. And then that money comes out of the management fees account into the right to rent account. This is the charge here, or the donation that is going to automatically happen. Okay. And over here, I just have that guest charge configuration that we used. You can make it all inclusive, which means that the guest doesn't see that as a line item if you choose to. And down here, talking about on the previous screen, that you want to begin this as of the date reserved. So you can set the guest charge up using a date range and select date reserved. So that way it will start adding this guest charge to the reservation the same date as you set up to start with the donations for right to rent.
Michelle,
And-
can I
Sure.
may I add something? A lot of people just take an existing guest fee, like an admin fee or something like that, and they add that $1, $2, or $3 to that. So they just change that, and typically it's so minor that it's not enough to influence whether, you know, the pricing on the home to make it less competitive. In fact, I think we had a pre-call this morning on this, and Miller's been set up for a month, I think, and wasn't even aware of it. Miller, have you had any reports of any guests pushing back or anything on this?
Zero. Yeah, I've been traveling from after the international event, and then I just got back from the executive summit in Los Angeles, and I actually thought that we got started about a week ago, and it was either Tracy or Tammy or Michelle. One said, "No, we've been doing this since the middle of October, early October," and I knew that we were doing it, and I knew it was turned on, but it's seamless. We have not heard anything. It's easy, super easy.
Great. And that's what we want to hear. And in this slide, I just want to talk about how this is going to change at month end. And it's not that big of a difference. The only thing is that you're going to add as part of your month end review is to pull the general ledger for this right to rent account, just to review it, review what money is distributed into that account. You'll have your ending balance, which when you go to expense your accounts, all of your management accounts for the end of the month, you'll expense this account as well as of that last day of the month. Now, unlike your management accounts, which go to the property manager, this account's configured with that VRMA vendor already attached. So when you expense that account, what's going to happen is it's going to send a payable to the check queue for VRMA. Now, you can either, again, print a check, or if you wish to do direct deposit, you simply check that box at the vendor profile, and click save, and then you can send a direct deposit onto VRMA. So the money never gets paid out again to VRM, to Inhabit IQ. This money goes directly to VRM to help with the advocacy for all the property managers. You know, so that is what this does. It's just one more account that you're going to expense simply by clicking a button at the end of the month and then sending that off to VRMA.
All right. So Michelle has walked us all the way through the process. I think what we might do too is we will clip just that section of Michelle's presentation that she just did and have just that section available for you, that if you're already completely convinced and don't need to watch any further, you just need to go look at the step-by-step how to do it. We'll have that little snippet for you available as well.
And Tracy, of course, if there's any questions that our clients have, please feel free to send us a ticket. We'll be happy to set up a call to walk through it like we did with Miller. So, you know, if there's any worry about the setup, we're happy to help.
Perfect. All right, so now we are ready to take any questions that anyone might have. I also put frequently asked questions because I wanted to give Miller and Scott an opportunity to think about what is the recurring questions I keep getting asked about the Right to Rent program, and be able to kind of present those at this time as well. So I don't see any questions in the Q&A slot at this time. Miller or Scott, do either of you have a frequently asked question you'd like to bring to the table?
Yeah, I get asked all the time about joining VRMA. How much does it cost? What are the benefits? You know, how can I help contribute to my community and, you know, my livelihood and so on? You can, I think Tracy's going to put my email address up there in just a minute, but you can either email me directly. I'll be happy to spend time with you on the phone, or a Zoom call to let you know the benefits and how easy it is to join. You can email me right there at my email address, and I will answer any questions. Or, you know, of course, you can go to the VRMA.org website, and everything is right there. You'll get out of this membership. You'll get so much more out of this membership than you can imagine what your investment is to join. And as Scott said earlier, turn on your right to rent in your software, and you get a membership for free for a year. And depending on how many properties you have, that could be into the thousands of dollars of cost savings for you.
Yes. The most frequently asked question I get, believe it or not, is why haven't we done this before? Because in many ways it seems so obvious. And the reason I think it's been is that before this, we didn't really have the mechanism, but now through PMS systems, we really do. And Michelle, you have done just a superior job of putting that together for VRM and their clients, and making it simple and clear. It's an example for everybody else out there to use, and we'll be picking from that for sure. So it's you know, I've had, if you've been impacted by regulations, you already know how important this is. But I can tell you, we launched this around the 1st of September with the streamlined PMS system, and we did it at their annual user conference. And there were literally people coming up with tears in their eyes saying, we are so happy to see this, because, you know, we don't know if we're going to be in business 6 months from now, the way things are going in our area. And it's a big deal. And, you know, it may not be happening to you now, but it truly is only a matter of time. And if it's not a direct regulation, it's something coming from the insurance company, from the building codes, from so many different directions that we don't even have the imagination yet to to foresee where all these angles come from, but they will continue.
And I love
So,
the idea of being a VRMA member and being able to have direct access to the government affairs segment. I'm not sure what the area of VRMA that is designated to just that. If you hear something going on in your community or your state, you can pick up the phone or send them an email, and they're there to protect you as a member. That's part of what they do. That's why they exist, right?
And the chairman of the Government Affairs Committee is a vacation rental manager. All of the committee members on the Government Affairs Committee, all the committee members on the Advocacy Fund, on the Collaborative, every one of us are vacation rental managers. There are suppliers that help with their time and contributions and so on. But, you know, other than the Director of Government Affairs, who's a VRMA staff member, everybody that's on these committees, that are heading these committees up, they're vacation rental managers around the country, you know, so it's protecting them as well. And it's so easy to get involved. It's so easy to get help, you know, from the VRMA, you know, so I highly encourage you to do that.
Awesome. So I'm gonna.
And I'd like to add to that, my information is down there too, and anybody that's an Inhabit client or using an Inhabit PMS system, in fact, anybody you know that's having a problem, please share my address, email address with them, and I'm happy to help and point people to the right directions, help form alliances, strategy, et cetera, et cetera.
All right, I'm going to do a little quick lightning round of questions. All right, so let's recap. A, does it cost me as a property manager to be involved with Right to Rent?
It costs you if you don't.
Yes. So no, it doesn't
Good
cost you a
answer.
dime, but it does cost you if you don't. I love it.
And I was not prepped with that question. You know, it will cost you if you don't.
All right. You're not going to lose any revenue by participating in the Right to Rent program. And does it cost me to be a VRMA member? Scott, for the first year anyway, if you're not already a member, is it going to cost them?
No, first year free, and I guarantee you the value from membership is if you were paying for it, it's still a super bargain. There are so many resources VRMA has, and they have a full-time staff that works so hard in the industry's interest, and you should be a VRMA member if you're in this business.
All right. So the only thing, and Miller did point this out earlier, the only thing that it might cost you is you're going to have a staff member that's taking a reservation, but that's what they're already doing anyway. You're not paying them anything additionally. They're already there. They're already doing their job. This information is going to be super automatic once it's set up. It's a very automated process from what we've seen so far. Michelle and her team and Jonathan on the back end have made that very easy.
Tracy, just to add to that, the reservationists don't need to do anything.
I was going to say,
all that you need is your accounting person to click expense ledger balance and then print a check or do a notcha file and send that money on to VRMA.
as you hear in so many industries, set it and forget it. That's it.
Yep. We tried hard to make that so it's less of impact for additional work for our property managers.
So it really truly is win-win. Win-win all across the table.
I actually said it and forgot it and realized I've been doing it a month.
That's what we want.
And then, like Miller said, hopefully then by the time he gets into like dispensing that like January amount, when they see that dollar amount of what they're actually able to contribute back over to VRMA, to the advocacy fund, that it's going to be a wow factor. They're going to be like, wow, this is amazing. And we are so happy that we've collected this money, we've set it aside, and now we're sending it over to VRMA.
And I guess the only, people are probably sitting there thinking to themselves, what's the drawback in this whole thing? you know, in our little prep call this morning we had on this, I think the only thing negative about this entire thing is you can't deduct your donation on your taxes, you know, but that's, I mean, other than that, you know, is it tax deductible? No, but the 101 other advantages outweigh that one. You don't get the deduction. You don't pay anymore, but you don't get the deduction.
And Miller, if I could take it a second to explain that. That same thing holds true with any organization that they belong to. If the funds are directed for advocacy or something that impacts regulation and law, it's not by law not allowed to be a deductible. It's the advocacy element of that precludes that being a deductible.
Well, that was great. I did not know that, so that's great to know. All right. Well, VRM clients, you've heard it here. Right to Rent program is something 100% that you need to be involved in. We have the president of VRMA. We have who is also a VRM client who also owns a property management company, telling you firsthand how important this is. You have Scott Leggett coming from a standpoint of a previous property manager who's been in this industry a really long time, now working with Inhabit IQ is in advocacy of just how important this is to protect yourself and protect what's coming down the road in the future. Because here's the thing that I see, and I'm definitely not on the level of playing field that Scott and Miller are, but here we have an industry that has just grown and grown and grown, and the demand for our industry has grown, and the product that we're serving, right, the vacation rental, the unit, that has grown and people want it. And so with that, I think we naturally can understand there will be increased regulation. And now we're prepared to give ourselves a fighting chance in this industry. So any final closing thoughts, Michelle, Miller, Scott?
I'd just like to say thank you for having us here, and happy Thanksgiving to everybody out there.
Yes, thank you.
And just in case you didn't hear,
Miller and Scott, you guys taking the time today to discuss this with us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
My pleasure.
And just in case you didn't hear what Scott said, his closing statement was sign up. So with that, we will sign off. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Thank you.